Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest Weekly Podcast, episode 15. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to this week's Cybersafe Digest, our podcast, episode 15. I'm Martin Roberts, the Managing Director of Newways, and I'm here with...
Toby Stephenson, Chief Technology Officer at Newways.
Well, welcome everybody. Now, I'll give you a quick warning. You might hear some buzzing in the background. If that's the case, it's just somebody drilling in. We're having some more EV points installed because we expand our fleet and make it easier to plug in. So if you hear a noise, don't worry about it. It's not me. It's actually the installers.
It's not a dentist's room or something like that.
Absolutely not. Though there's an idea for a podcast it would be like talking about cybersecurity, doing it from a dentist's chair, perhaps, but then you never know. Okay, let's just talk. Last week's episode, we talked about admin credentials and such like, and who should have them and who shouldn't. And we clearly determined, Toby, that I shouldn't, as managing director.
Nobody should have them.
Nobody should have them.
They should be very scantily issued.
Absolutely, and just to make sure that, and we talked about the problem that when they've been in widespread use across an organisation, the pain of taking them away is pretty hard work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pitchforks and burning torches.
Absolutely, and we've seen that a few times. But we get over it in the end because we recognise the value that it offers. And then I thought we should talk about just the other basic things that we've talked about these over the last few weeks, but other basic things we should do just to improve the overall security posture of your organisation, to get to base one. Even if you're a small enterprise, small business, these are the things that you ought to do. And even if you're a larger enterprise, obviously you should be doing them. And again, let me reiterate that we're talking to hopefully people who are CEOs, CFOs, managing directors, finance directors who are responsible for IT but don't necessarily execute IT. And you're probably relying on somebody within your organisation, an IT manager, or a third party to do this stuff for you. These are questions that you could ask and ensure that these things are done to improve that posture of your organisation. So we talked about admin credentials. What's the next thing on your list, Toby, that you'd put down as the must-do?
Yeah, we spoke about admin credentials, removing those. I think that's a really, really important one, and doesn't really cost anything. You don't have to buy anything to do, which I think is a really important thing. It's just something that you have to accept and do.
Yeah.
And the things that are on my list really are all in that same kind of vein. They are things that will either cost nothing or cost very little. They can make big advances in your security posture, and they're mostly just a case of getting on and doing them. So the first one on my list is enable MFA.
Yes. And
I'll target this slightly on your 365 and cloud environments. And the reason for that is deploying MFA to an internal server estate is actually quite difficult and expensive.
Yeah.
But actually it comes with everybody's 365 licensing.
So it's no big deal.
So you're not paying any extra for it. And we touched on it on previous podcasts, so I won't bore the listeners, but it makes a massive difference to the security posture, because as well as knowing something, which is a username and password, you have to have something. And that then makes it a lot harder for a remote actor to take credentials and use them far away, overseas or wherever. Yeah. So it makes a massive difference. It's not the be all and end all of security, but it's a bit like having a burglar alarm on your house. If that man with swag on his bag is walking down the street and he sees two houses, he's going to go for the one that looks like it's the easiest bet. And that big burglar alarm bell on the front of the house will normally discourage them, because it's going to make a noise, it's going to ring somebody or tell somebody. So
now, sometimes some organisations, I'm going to digress just for a few seconds here, well, minutes actually, of course, is we talk about somebody having a device in their possession which allows them MFA to be used. So, the way MFA works, folks, is that you're trying to log into your Office 365. It will interact with you and tell you, hey, there's a number here. Go into your authenticator, type this number in, and there's sometimes occasionally resistance from organisations, people in the organisation, whereby they're asked to install the authenticator on their own personal phone, for instance. And I've witnessed this a few times where people it gets a little bit blown out of proportion, whereby I say, well, I don't want to have an authenticator on my phone because it's not software.
Yeah, it's almost like it's more the principle of it rather than the actual activity of it.
Yeah, because the impact actually is very low.
Exactly.
But isn't there an implication whereby, does that, so here's the question, do those person's phone need to be part of the management of the company, so that information could be wiped from the phone in the event of the phone being stolen or that person leaving and things like that? Is that relevant here, or is that just a bit of a side noise?
No, in the case of an authenticator app, it doesn't fall within scope for any of those things. It's not actually holding any company data. The company has no purview over that device once that authenticator app is installed. It literally is a means to an end. It's a cryptographical process that links to the service that you're signing in, and as you say, pops up with a request to insert a number, or sometimes it'll pop up with a number that you insert into the site, depending on the actual nature of it. But there's no company data. The company can't see anything and has no control over anything you do with it. So it's a bit of a red herring, I think. Yeah,
but I've seen that in a few organisations whereby it's turned into a big event and actually it's held off the installation of MFA. And actually, if you're the right size organisation, don't let it distract you. Get the security on, get it in, get it working, and then you can talk about the other things about devices and
exactly. And I think the other thing is MFA is the acronym for multi-factor authentication. It just basically means more than one factor. So username and password is a single factor. It's actually, the colloquialism is now MFA, but it used to be 2FA, two-factor authentication, or two-step authentication, which was doing two things to prove your identity. So now with multi-factor, it's kind of the banner with which all of these things sit under, because you can use multiple types. But MFA doesn't just mean having something on your phone. You can get other devices, other hardware devices that can take the place of them. They're not always appropriate, and they may have a steeper learning curve to use them. So the mobile phone and the app is typically seen as the universally accessible way of doing it. But there may be areas of the business where you can't take a phone into, and therefore you need to look at something different.
That could be an issue, but a lot of it is about the first elements of resistance to implementing MFA using people's own phones. It comes up, and people get very excited and hot under the collar about it, when in reality it's not a big deal. And actually, if I were in a position where I was a user and I'm being asked to use MFA on my own phone, the balance of risk would be that actually I'll do that because at least I won't be accused later on, or I would make my login safer, so I wouldn't put myself at risk of making a faux pas and risking the business integrity, cybersecurity integrity. So.
Yeah, it's in everyone's interest for the business systems to remain secure, and it doesn't feel a hugely onerous ask for someone to install an app on their personal device. For some people it is, but for me it doesn't feel like it should be that big a deal.
Okay, digression over then. So that's MFA. So the next on your list, Tony, that you would do?
Yeah, so this follows from what we spoke around on the last podcast, principle of least privilege. Yeah. This is basically locking down all of your file shares so that they're accessible on a need-to-know basis. People can only access the files and folders that they need to have access to.
But does that carry a huge overhead for administrators, for people, or is it simple within the application?
It's relatively simple. It depends on the size of the file and folder structure. It depends on how granular you want to be. Unfortunately, it's one of these things that does somewhat fall into the technical debt category. If you've not done it for a long time, it's going to be a little bit painful. It's not going to cost any money other than the time and effort that someone puts into it, because this is all native functionality within modern operating systems. But there is some work that may need to be done. There's likely to be some friction, particularly if permissions get set incorrectly. But it's an absolutely essential part of locking that system down. If your environment is to be compromised by a threat actor, you want to limit the access to what that threat actor can see. If you've got a fully open file share where everyone can see everything, you're just rolling out the red carpet.
They can traverse the whole network
Very easily, yeah. Now, they will then do other things, but this is about making the attacker's life more difficult and giving them more opportunity to reveal themselves by tripping over things and flagging that they're there.
I think going back to the concept earlier on, the thing earlier on where we talked about having a burglar alarm box on the front of the house. I'm not going to go and do that one. I'll do that one without. And I guess if a hacker gets into your system and they've got a choice between going through a system with open privileges where they can get to anything, and one which have some security imposed, where they're going to spend their time, where they're going to take their opportunity.
Exactly, and it's not just external threat actors. It's disgruntled employees. People that may be going on to other roles, or they have a grudge to bear or axe to grind.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile taking into account that a lot of companies don't think they'll ever be in that situation with the disgruntled employee leaving, and it's probably causing problems. And we've been called in on a number of occasions to organisations whereby they're trying to shut that door after the horse has bolted, whereby if you work from the principle in the first place of having that least privilege and such like, that becomes less of a problem. We went into somewhere recently where something had happened, and they were very, very worried indeed about what the employee would do, and there was a great deal more work to put things right, and in a way it alerted many other people that there was a problem with that particular employee. So having that as a basic principle is very valuable and will, in the event of an issue, save an awful lot of time later on.
Yeah, definitely. It's a reasonable amount of work to get it all set up in the first place, but actually the ongoing maintenance of it is trivial. So it's definitely worth investing the time to secure those files and folders.
Okay, so that's that. The next one on your list?
Yeah, bit of a combination really, but it's all around policies for passwords and screen locks and things like that. So one of the things that we often see when we go in and perform a cyber audit, despite the assurances of the host organisation that they are having their employees lock screens when they leave the desks, is they invariably don't, and the screens stay open for minutes, tens of minutes at a time, and we observe that happening. And again, some of it is around this malicious insider. I see a machine unlocked over there, I can go and do anything under the guise of that individual. But it's also around what if that device is out in a public space, if it's on the train or in an airport or in a coffee shop and it's left unattended, do people understand the risk that potentially brings? And I think the second point around it is also passwords and password policies. It's very easy to err on the side of convenience in the convenience versus security argument around policies. I mean, I've had a discussion with a customer recently around password length. What is appropriate, and actually it's easier for people to type in a much shorter password. It doesn't meet all of the requirements that you need. This is are you just going to shove a peg in the front door to keep it shut, or are you going to have a proper lock and key for it? And I think the thing that binds all of these together is these are technical controls that can be implemented. I think one of the other things that often gets overlooked is the paper policy that is associated with that, because these are the rules of engagement. These are the guardrails that tell people how they can and should work. And so if people don't know they should have a 12-character password, and why they should have a 12-character password, they're going to push back, or they're not going to have one. So I think that's a really important thing to have to support all of these things. It's part of an education process, and again, it doesn't cost anything. It's just the effort of setting these things up and making a decision as to what your security posture is going to be.
I mean, having policies, publishing those policies, getting people to sign up to those policies or acknowledge that they've seen them, and then implementing them has actually very little cost in terms of financial outlay. Okay, it takes time, but it's certainly well worthwhile doing, and it makes it clear. If you don't know what the rules are and the rules aren't published, how can you follow them?
Exactly. I mean, it's you see it in everyday life. You see it when you're driving on the road.
Yes.
You know that the rules are, this is a 30 mile an hour zone. This is the motorway. It's 70 miles an hour.
Yes.
Those rules are published and they're understood, and therefore they can be enforced.
Yes.
Without those rules being published, if you were pulled over for doing 85 on the motorway, well, I can't.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, I mean, about habits as well, I always lock my screen, and bizarrely at home as well, because I do it in the office and I work from home more these days. And the keystrokes, I know, and I can't leave a keyboard without doing it, and sometimes not even my own. And it's such an easy thing to do. And if you work in some organisations where there's a sense of fun, which we may do occasionally, if we have a newbie start here and they don't lock their screen, they find out sometimes the hard way by sending out, appears as though they sent out an email inviting everybody to have the cakes that they're going to bring in tomorrow. So it's a quick way to learn that you're going to lock the screen on the way out. So. And
it's, if you're on a Windows machine, it's Windows K.
Yep.
That's the keystroke to lock your screen straight away. There's no excuse for not locking your screen when you leave it.
None whatsoever.
You have a screen timeout with a lock on it as the safety net, but actually it's good muscle memory just to get into the habit of Windows K as you leave your desk.
Yeah, just do it. Now, we just go back to passwords for a minute. We've talked about this before. Get a password manager is our recommendation.
Yeah, it makes managing secure passwords so much easier. Yeah. You don't have to invent them. You don't have to write them down somewhere. Most of these tools will inject the credential into the application that you're trying to run. It's an absolute no-brainer. They're relatively low cost.
Yeah.
So it's one of the ones that it's in the, it still fits into the category of this no or low cost, because it is a relatively cheap undertaking for the extra peace of mind that it can give you.
Okay. So that's all very useful stuff, relatively low cost. We'll just finish on this one, Toby, and it's one which is, I always still think is a bit Wild West in our industry, and that's Wi-Fi networks. Yeah, people, they're ever so easy to install. You go and buy a network point, you plug it in, and off you jolly. And it's there for convenience of people, but they're very often not set up as perhaps they would best set up. People don't use best practice in setting them up, because it's about solving a problem right now. What's the best practice for setting up a Wi-Fi point from your point of view?
So Wi-Fi is a really tricky one, because you can spend a fortune on installing secure Wi-Fi and doing it really, really well.
Yeah.
And you can spend next to nothing on doing it really, really badly, and everything in between. If we ignore the enterprise level settings and all of the really exciting, clever things that you can do with that, think about some basic principles around Wi-Fi. The first would be, and if your Wi-Fi system doesn't allow you access to these settings, it's definitely time to consider replacing it, because these are some things that I would consider to be absolute baseline mandatory things. So the first thing is disable the types of Wi-Fi that you don't need. And by that I mean there is different encryption levels. So what we see now coming out is WPA3, which is the latest and greatest security standard. Your hardware needs to support it.
Sure.
And as you can probably imagine, before that there was WPA2 and WPA.
They're not very creative sometimes.
They're not. So take a look at the devices you've got within your business.
Yeah.
Work out what is the best they can support, and turn the other stuff off. Because a lot of these systems, unfortunately, for compatibility, will allow you to downgrade, and so therefore an attacker can take your super secure WPA3 Wi-Fi system and pretend to be a dumb WPA device, and it will downgrade with all the inherent flaws and liabilities that these earlier encryption systems have. So turn off the encryption systems that you don't need.
And just for clarity, I mean, this is, you can log on to the Wi-Fi router, and there'll be a page which says security, and you can decide which protocols should be on or off.
Yeah, I mean, on this particular one, even on most home routers. So I'm with Sky at the moment on that particular router. I can go on and I can say there's two options: WPA2 only or WPA and WPA2. So I can turn off basically the one that allows the downgrade. So I would definitely recommend doing that. If your Wi-Fi device allows you to create a guest network, do that. That way anyone that is a guest, a visitor to your organisation, connects to that Wi-Fi network. Most systems that provide a guest network allow you to tick a little box that basically says internet access only. Paraphrasing slightly, but essentially they connect to the guest Wi-Fi and they can't get inside your network.
Right, okay. So, of course, when you put your network point in, wireless network point in, you're connecting to everything on your network in theory.
It is a piece of invisible electric string that is merely replacing the bit of copper cable that you would normally wire into the network with.
Sure, but the guest is actually saying, hey, you can get to the internet, but no further, thank you very much.
So it's a form of isolation or segmentation, and most business-orientated devices will allow you to do that. Some home devices allow you to do it as well, but most, even entry-level business devices, will allow you to create that kind of segmentation. But it won't be turned on by default in most cases. You'll have to go and do it.
Okay. Is there anything else you should do to a new router as a very basic security? They're the basics.
So I would absolutely say always, change the password for the login. Because in many cases that is just a default that's known across all of that system. So change that straight away. I would also argue to change the Wi-Fi name and code that comes with it by default, even on a home device. Right. Because again, these can be identified and worked out from other data that's in the airwaves. So you can work out what the device is and if it's got a default password. Now, again, some providers are better than others and they have a random password, but I wouldn't necessarily trust the randomness of it. I would put your own one in to be absolutely certain.
Okay, and obviously store it in your password manager.
Of course. And then the final thing I'll probably say around it, and again, even the more basic business Wi-Fi systems will do this, is if they have a scheduling system for when the Wi-Fi is on and off, make use of that. If you don't need the Wi-Fi on in the office at the weekends, have it turned off, because it can't be exploited. Somebody can't sit in the car park or in the housing estate across the road and try and break into your network if it's not on.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes absolute sense, because that gives them time.
Exactly. And a lot of these lower end ones, the higher end systems, which we're purposely not talking about, but these lower end systems that are more popular with small to medium sized businesses, don't always make it very obvious that someone is trying to take advantage and trying to log on repeatedly. So anything you can do to reduce your overall attack surface is always warranted. And if there's a scheduling feature, have the Wi-Fi on from Monday morning at weekdays 9 till 5, that kind of thing. Don't have it on at the weekends, don't have it on overnight if you don't need it.
Okay, so I think the thing to take away from that is, let's face it, it's actually very easy. It's relatively easy to do. It's cheap to do, and if you've got a few minutes today, folks, go and see what Wi-Fi points you've got and check the status of them.
Yeah, and these things are relatively basic. If what you've got doesn't do that,
go and buy another one.
Yeah, you don't have something that is suitable for your business.
And I guess from a business point of view, actually, from a business owner's point of view, you want to show that you take security seriously. And if you've got visitors coming to your site and they ask you for it, or they can see the Wi-Fi and it's got no password on it and they connect directly, or it's a single network, it's not a guest one, whatever, that leaves an impression with the visitor. So not only can you be damaged by people who have intent to do damage to you by hacking your networks, but actually you can do damage to yourself without even thinking about it by not having secure presentation to the world. And it's very important that your business partners come in and see that you do things properly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, particularly with Wi-Fi, if somebody manages to get your code and they're sat in the car park or across the road, you wouldn't even necessarily know that they're connected to your network. If there's a stranger sat in your office with their computer plugged into the wall, but you wouldn't necessarily know it if they were outside and using the airwaves to make that connection.
There we go. Right, so a few tips there this week. Thank you very much, Toby. I hear that you're off next week to sunnier climes.
Yes, I'm off to a cybersecurity conference next week, so Zero Trust World in Orlando.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoy that. And we're going to do a broadcast directly from there. Well, you are going to be.
Yes.
And obviously, for convenience, it'll be done in my time zone, my convenience.
I'll set my alarm.
Yeah, and we'll talk about what you learn during that conference.
Yep.
You know, Toby goes to a number of these events, and we go to them across the year, and I never come away without learning something. So I always come away feeling a bit more frightened and a bit more worried, but you have to know this stuff to be able to know what to do.
Absolutely, yeah, you have to know your enemy.
Yeah,
and know your battleground.
Yeah. So but there'll be some interesting insights from that next time. Thank you very much this week, Toby.
Welcome.
And we'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 15 of our Cybersafe Digest Weekly Podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.